Hi everyone, my name is Siamak and this is my geosynthetics podcast. So, welcome to this episode of my podcast. And as you can see, I have a special guest in this episode. Jong is my guest. Welcome, Sue, to this episode.
Thanks, Siamak.
Great to have you here. And we're going to talk about very interesting topics today, especially where Sue is coming from, the Southeast Asia, the market in there, the geosynthetics industry in Southeast Asia, and we're going to talk about that in this episode. But let me start with your career, Sue. If you want to tell us and my audience, where did you start? How did you end up in the geosynthetics industry?
So, hello everyone. I'm Jong, and currently I'm working for Carpitech, which is a waterproofing specialist. But for the last 10 and 11 years, I've always been working in the manufacturing or the suppliers for geosynthetics materials, and that's probably my first career starting off from universities.
Yeah.
And I've been always with geosynthetics for the last 10 years. It's not short, it's not too long. Just a pretty nice time, and this is probably my 11 years now in geosynthetics, and I'm still kicking and running. Yeah,
Perfect.
still enjoying it.
That's great. That's great. And we lucky to have you here in Australia. I guess you're coming for maybe mainly the GeoANZ conference, which is happening next week in Australia. But let's talk about the industry, the market, geosynthetics market in Southeast Asia. I mean, we're talking about quite a big area anyway, like all of China, Taiwan, Malaysia, Indonesia, even Thailand. So huge area. But I think what we have seen in that region is the growth of geosynthetics applications and manufacturing, supply. Various companies have been investing in that region.
Right.
So if you want to tell us about that first, and then we'll get to the other questions.
I think throughout my experience for the last 10 years, we do see quite an obvious or tremendous growth in Southeast Asia region, being that like what you mentioned, there are a lot of foreign investors, foreign manufacturers opening their manufacturing plant in that region, and being a developing, a region with mostly developing economics. It also, I think, helps in terms of the use of geosynthetics in different types of applications. So say, for example, in terms of landfills, my experience in Malaysia, Malaysia previously, back in probably the 80s and 90s, we have more open pits for land dumping instead of engineered landfills. But nowadays, you see more engineered landfills being designed by engineers because of the knowledge and how they understand the materials to be used for certain applications. So landfills nowadays in Malaysia are more engineered rather than open dumping, although we still have some which needs to be tackled. And in some other countries in South Asia region, for example in Indonesia, they also have quite a good regulations now to actually regulate landfills. And in terms of road infrastructures, I think that's probably a traditional, very strong market for geosynthetics, and it hasn't been decreased. It has been increasing in terms of the geosynthetics materials being used in that applications. You see a lot of roads nowadays being built with reinforcement geosynthetics, or there are definitely types of separation geotextiles being used before constructing a road. And also a lot of non-woven geotextiles being used as filters or as a silk control. So in terms of other applications such as hydraulics applications, I think there's also quite a lot of usage to actually reduce erosions, which we know. Most of the Southeast Asian regions countries are mainly has a long coastline, so erosion is a big problem in some countries. For example, there are some in Malaysia, and there's a big problem in Vietnam, and we see geo tubes, geo bags being used very commonly in these countries.
That's right.
So I see a lot of growth and a lot of activities in the market, which is very encouraging.
Yeah, great. So comes with that, I think, I would say same as everything else, like first you want to introduce your solution to the market. You just want to say, these are the products that you can consider in your design. And then it starts sort of getting some traction, getting some momentum, and people more and more use it. But then what it comes out of that is some misuse or some lower quality that can even impact on the reputation of the industry and all of that. Right. So what I want to ask you about is in terms of generally quality standards, and how do you think the Southeast Asia region is going with those?
I think with growth, the qualities also increase.
Yep.
But it really depends on how much the suppliers is aware of it, and also how much the users knows what materials they are using and how to actually ensure the quality of the materials they use is good. And then because of the growth itself, it's getting strong, and more people are actually used to the materials, so they know which points or which materials fits into their applications, and they know the manufacturers, which is good, and some probably isn't that well established, and they also know how to actually control this I would say specifications from the suppliers. So in terms of the qualities, I would say most of the established manufacturers in Southeast Asian regions has quite good qualities materials. And with a very good QA/QC plans, they would be able to produce pretty good materials. There might be some, I would say, recently established geosynthetics manufacturers that are catching up on that, which I would say it's a really good news for the manufacturers. It's a sort of competitions, and it is also good for the users, where the quality of the materials is actually increasing, and they have less problems from whatever materials that they are using. So in general, most of the materials, I would say, in terms of qualities, it is definitely improving in times. So it's just that the users, the manufacturers should be aware of what sort of standards they should use and what sort of quality or materials they should pursue. And also I would also like to highlight is that I think some of the countries are also aware of the amount of manufacturers, the products they are getting for the projects they are applying. So some countries do have standards in place to actually control the qualities of the materials that they are using for public works or public projects. So it's I would say it's actually also very positive in terms of quality, where you get quality controls from the manufacturing side. The users are getting more aware of the qualities, and in terms of the regulations, they are regulating I would say strictly or more strict.
And that's mainly with the material or manufacturing QA, quality assurance. What about the construction QA? Is that also part of the plan, or is there something that you see in Southeast Asia, like not just focusing on the material itself, but also like installation? Because we have seen a lot of quality issues with those.
That's definitely a very legit question, and I would say in terms of the level of control, if we are comparing to Australia, probably it's not as strict as in Australia. And some project that I've seen, you see they are stepping up the game to actually control the construction quality more stringent. But I would say a lot of this needs to be done more, and probably we are not until that level yet. And I would say more efforts needs to be taken to actually improve not only the quality of the materials, but the quality of the construction itself.
Absolutely. The other topic, Sue, I'm quite interested in hearing from you as someone who's worked in Southeast Asia for many years, because as you said in an earlier, there has been lots of foreign investors, plus some local manufacturers, and that creates competition. So and like in conjunction with the quantity of material that they want to produce and the markets they're trying to get into, comes with quality as well. So what projects are critical that they need, like a high quality, and that also creates a competition. Like there's competition on quantity, who sells more, and competition on quality, who sells the best material. Tell us about that. How does that work in Southeast Asia? How's that competition going? Do you see that healthy happening? In advantage or benefit of the industry?
Well, I think probably in the first few years of my career, when we see more and more investments getting into Southeast Asian market, I would say probably it depends more on the volumes rather than qualities, because that's where they first started to generate more revenues.
Yeah.
And when they get, when they establish enough in that region, then they look into the qualities of the materials. And when also the users know that we need to be aware of the qualities, that's when also the manufacturers know that they need to be aware of the qualities.
Yeah.
So most of the traditional or typical manufacturers that has been in the industry for long, in the region for long, they are probably very much known for the qualities, and they are, I would probably say, they are probably the tier one materials that most of the manufacturers, the suppliers or users would actually goes for. And when it goes to other foreign investment that is rather new to the market, nowadays we have seen a lot of improvements in the materials quality, because I think they also know that if they are only competing with only quantity, it wouldn't be sustainable.
Yeah.
So for whatever manufacturing or manufacturers to be sustainable in a certain market, I mean, quantity, they'll need to be able to supply, but they'll need to be able to supply good materials as well. So with a market that is getting more mature, I would say, the quality of the materials from competitions is also getting better.
Yeah.
So when you have more competitions, it promotes growth in the market. And of course, with competitions, it also promotes, I would say, innovations and creativities among manufacturers to be able to produce a much better or much efficient materials. So that's what I've seen in the market for the last couple of years, during COVID and even after COVID. A lot of investment actually comes into Southeast Asian region, and you do see, I mean, some manufacturers, probably the quality of materials might not be that good, but most of them, or a lot of them, are actually seeing an improvement in terms of what types of materials they can supply, and also the quality of the materials they can supply. So that's what I've seen in the region. It's actually, it's definitely improving.
Exactly. And I think what we've seen here in Australia is that, well, obviously a lot of material we use here are sourced or manufactured in somewhere in Asia. Obviously, the competition is also on the quality, who can meet the spec that is basically produced here in Australia for big projects, critical projects, and we've seen really high quality material coming from Southeast Asia into our market in Australia, and really high quality. So absolutely. and another question I had for you, so we talked about maybe the past and present. I want to ask you about future. What do you think that outlook of geosynthetics is, especially in Southeast Asia, and what do you think is going to be maybe the main drivers in terms of the future of geosynthetics?
I think nowadays, I think everyone is talking about sustainability, being green, and we know as a fact that geosynthetics materials, when we are comparing it to natural materials, for example, concretes, natural aggregates, we know as a fact that geosynthetics materials is definitely more sustainable, or more in terms of carbon saving. They are definitely a better choice for certain projects, and for a market as Southeast Asian region, with I think most of the countries being in as a developing economics, we are also committed to actually reduce the carbon footprints of our countries. And in terms of the efforts, I think that's also when we see the benefits of having to use geosynthetics for a certain projects or applications. So in terms of a future outlook, I would say it's definitely promising as how people would be able to utilize the materials for the projects, and with a lot of new minds, new brains coming out from the universities. I would say the applications of geosynthetics, the type of geosynthetics that we see in the market, would definitely be more compared to before, and how they are used would probably be more creative than before.
That's
so definitely a very upbeat environment in Southeast Asia, and I would say it's a very promising outlook to see more geosynthetics being used in the market in Southeast Asia.
Absolutely. That's great to hear, and I think something that we are going to host here in Australia next year. I use this opportunity to promote the GeoAsia conference, first time happening in Australia. It's GeoAsia number 8, and I wanted to use this opportunity and invite everyone listening to this podcast to come to Brisbane next June 2025 and be part of this big conference. I think we're going to have a lot of conversations around how we as a region are sort of developing in terms of sharing the experience from every country, every region, and also the outlook and how we want to move forward. So that will be a great opportunity to talk about these subjects as well. My last question for you, Sue, is again back to your career. So you said 11 years in geosynthetics, and I guess that's something I ask every one of my guests in this podcast, and that's what I call a highlight in your career. So, what is your highlights in the past 11 years when you think about it, and then and why is that your highlight?
My highlight is probably a bit down to earth, I would say. It's probably from my first career in geosynthetics. That's when I get into the industry, and my first career with the first technical team. I think that time we only have like 2 or 3 people, and we are really getting into the technicalities of the materials and getting to work in a team that is technically sound. I think that really sort of bind me into the material, into the industry, and I've been staying in the industry for the past 10 years. It's a decade now, so which is nice. And I would say that's probably my small little highlight in my career with the first technical teams of my first company.
Exactly. No, that's great. That's great. I think it sort of it must have had a long-term effect on your career, as you say, and obviously working in a team that everyone is helping each other, everyone is sort of contributing to the success of the team. That's something that definitely helps anyone further down the track.
Especially for fresh grads.
Exactly. And one thing I really hope that we see more and more of, not just in Southeast Asia region, also we have the same in Australia, and I guess talking to a lot of colleagues in Europe and America, quite similar. And you mentioned as well previously the younger generations and the future graduates coming out of university. Being able to share this experience with them, and then also seeing them grow and develop into this geosynthetics, because like you said, it's moving forward, it's sustainable, it's the future. So absolutely best opportunity for a young generation.
I think it's a great experience to be a part of the industry. It's rather different compared to an engineer working for a design firm or contractor. But I would say you do see a project from a different angle, and meeting different people, which is always really interesting.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thanks a lot, Sue, for accepting my invitation and being my guest in this episode of the podcast. And thanks for listening to us or watching us in this episode. And we'll catch up with you in our next episode. Thank you.
So.